And welcome to Tackling Health Inequities Through Innovation, an event that we at Matter are producing together with the American Heart Association. I'm Stephen Collins, I'm the CEO of Matter. Our mission is to accelerate the pace of change of healthcare, and we do several things to support our mission. We run an incubator for healthcare startups. We've supported more than 1,000 companies from around the world that have gone on to raise more than $5 billion to fuel their growth. We work with large enterprises to help them build their innovation capabilities with a suite of education and training and insight services that help established organizations make sense of emerging technologies and figure out the best ways to harness them. We run thematic accelerators in partnership with organizations ranging from Fortune 500 companies to associations, foundations, and universities. We are currently running several, including the Heart of Innovation HBCU Challenge, together with the American Heart Association. The program is focused on solutions to improve social drivers of health, improve cardiovascular health, and promote healthy environments. We are the digital health hub of BARDA, which is the arm of the Federal Department of Health and Human Services, tasked with nurturing innovations to make the country more resilient and prepared for future pandemics and other public health emergencies. And we frequently bring people together to be inspired and learn, and that's what we're doing today with a group who will discuss the role historically Black colleges and universities play in addressing health disparities and inequities. Following the discussion, we'll share more about the Heart of Innovation HBCU Challenge. We have something of a legend in the world of healthcare, venture capital, and entrepreneurship to moderate today. Lisa Swainin, who joined the American Heart Association this year to run AHA Ventures, which is a multi-fund platform investing in companies across the full spectrum of healthcare and social determinants of health. So Lisa is a longtime healthcare entrepreneur and investor working across healthcare and life sciences. She's held general partner roles at multiple funds and operating roles at companies both large and small. She chairs the scientific advisory board of the NASA-funded Translational Research Institute for Space Health and chairs the investment advisory committee of And Health, which is a digital health commercialization entity funded by the Australian government. She teaches at UC Berkeley. She is an Aspen Institute Health Innovators Fellow, and she is a prolific writer, commenting on healthcare innovation at her Venture Valkyrie blog. Lisa, thank you for joining us. I welcome you. Thank you for doing this, and I will turn it over to you to introduce our panelists and kick things off.
Hi, Stephen. Great to see you, and thank you so much for that nice introduction. It's wonderful to be here. I've been at the Heart Association now for almost a year, and one of the things that's been most impressive to me, there are many things, but one of the things is our deep and meaningful commitment to health equity. It is no joke here. We take it very seriously. It's part of everything we do. My program, the American Heart Association Ventures, as Stephen said, is a multi-fund organization. One of those is a social impact fund where we specifically invest in equity of companies, for-profit companies, and give grants to nonprofit organizations focused on addressing various health equity issues that anchor around social drivers of health. We have this very significant Office of Health Equity where we run many programs, among which is this great HBCU challenge. And I'm delighted to be here today to talk about that with some people who've been involved. And so what I'd love to do is invite Julius and Michelle and Ariana onto the screen. I get to moderate a panel of super smart people with better things to say than I. So I'm going to start by asking each of them to give a very brief introduction to themselves. Maybe Michelle, since you're right where my eyes went, I'll start with you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yes, I am Michelle Jones. I am a career coach, currently a career coach at Prairie View A&M University. Where empowering students to transform career aspirations into achievements is my motto, my passion.
Ariana.
Hi, I'm Ariana McGee, and I am the CEO and founder of Navigate maternity. We are a tech-enabled medical device company focusing on improving outcomes for prenatal and postpartum moms. Thank you for having me. And I'm also a former, I also was part of the Empowered to Serve, which was hosted by the American Heart Association earlier this year. So
Yeah, another wonderful program we have, which is an accelerator for companies focused on health equity in various forms and specifically around HBCU programs. Julius.
Yeah, I'll share my screen so I can show you very quickly my background. It'll just take a second here. Yeah, I've led diversity strategies at 6 global companies now, primarily on the life sciences side, AbbVie, Takeda, J&J, Genentech, Cerner, and spent a little time outside of the life sciences space at Russell Athletic and Coca-Cola. I was in the Navy a number of years, and Pacific Fleet and Atlantic Fleet, and I'm also the chair of the board of a nonprofit based in Chicago called the Center for Healthcare Innovation. And our focus is on healthcare disparities and leveraging technology to try to drive solutions to those healthcare disparities and health equity.
Terrific. Well, I appreciate all you being here. There's a lot of great knowledge to work with. So let me start with you, Julius. When you think about your perspectives as a leader in the diversity and health equity area, what are the systemic barriers that you see that are most prevalent? And more importantly, perhaps, what steps are crucial to address them? How do we solve this problem?
That's a good question, Lisa. Thanks for the question. And it's a complex question. And I'm going to give you a specific case study of something that I did to address that at another pharma company that I was at. I'm going to share my screen with you one more time, but it really involves 3 things. It involves conceptual clarity, it involves mission clarity, and it involves alignment with the stated goals and objectives of the organization that you're working with to address those things. So we had just gotten approval for a drug to be used in the palliative treatment of prostate cancer in men. And as I was doing the etiology of the disease and sort of understanding how the drug worked, it worked upstream at the hypothalamic, just a little quick physiology, it worked upstream at the hypothalamic pituitary axis to downregulate production of testosterone. It was a once-a-month injectable, had to be delivered in the doctor's office. And as I was doing all of this work around the etiology of the disease, I was shocked to learn that Black men have a 70% greater incidence of prostate cancer. And so I immediately went back to the leadership team and said, look, we need to be spending more time with Black doctors. They've got to be seeing more of these patients. And I was shocked as to all of this pushback I got. Well, Julius, you know, those doctors in the less desirable geographical areas, their patients aren't compliant. They don't want to see people from the commercial side. Heck, they don't even pay their bills on time. And I said, wait a minute, there's a word we use. What's the word we use to describe what you all just told me? Oh, yeah, those are what we call stereotypes. So I learned my first valuable lesson about doing the work and in answering your question, which is that even when my gut's moving me in the right direction, I still need empirical data to support whatever it is I'm trying to do. So I got permission from the VP of Sales to do a demonstration project to target a few Black urologists and try to increase the number of patients that they would be treating with our drug. So my goal was to target 3 Black urologists, and my goal was to basically hit 30% of their new patients. Within 6 months, we'd exceeded the 30% mark. They were adding every eligible new patient that they had to be treated palliatively for prostate cancer with this drug. And all of a sudden, the leadership team got interested. They said, wait a minute, this is actually having an impact. And we rolled the strategy out nationally. And just to the audience, just take a guess. What percentage of the total number of urologists in the United States do you think are Black? You don't have to answer. I just want you to think about that. Well, it turns out Black urologists are 2.2% of the total number of urologists in the United States, and they ended up driving 20% of the gross sales. All of a sudden, I knew I'd hit the nail on the head because everybody in the company took credit for our success, especially the people who've been skeptical initially. And so the whole key to this was to be sure that I was aligned with the overall goals and objectives of the organization. So this was a significant amount of revenue. It was a significant market share run. And within 3 years, we had tripled the number of underrepresented demographic minorities in the company in sales, management, marketing, finance, accounting, and training roles. And we doubled the number of women in those same roles because we also eventually got approval to use this drug to treat endometriosis and uterine leiomyomas. Leiomyomas are benign fibroid tumors. Black women over-index for these fibroid tumors, and oftentimes Black women and Latinas are underdiagnosed or misdiagnosed for endometriosis. So there are two things I want you to keep in mind from this example that I just gave you. One is that I stayed aligned with the mission of the organization. I was very clear about what we were trying to accomplish, and I proved to everyone that targeting these healthcare providers who were seeing these at-risk patients was actually going to drive revenue and market share for the organization. But at the same time, we did a lot of education in those at-risk communities, and we did a lot of screening in these underserved communities. The other thing I want you to keep in mind is, in the course of telling you that entire story, and when I have more time, I usually go through it in much more detail, but in the course of telling you that story, I never once used the words diversity, equity, inclusion, or belonging, and yet everything I talked to you about was firmly grounded in building and managing diversity, building equitable structures across the enterprise, being sure that we were being collaborative and inclusive, and of course, creating a sense of belonging, not only amongst the patients in terms of a patient group that have been overlooked and ignored, but also the providers for those patients.
All
So you
right.
got to keep those things in mind.
Those are great. That was a great example, Julius. And Michelle, it's an interesting example, and I'm wondering if you can give us a perspective on how and why you think people that participate at HBCUs are kind of, and maybe you don't agree with this, but I'm guessing you do, are uniquely prepared to address health disparities through innovation.
Yeah, sure thing, Lisa. Thank you. So, as you could imagine, HBCUs are at the forefront of health disparities research, making sure we're addressing those critical issues in our underserved communities. So we have institutions like Morehouse School of Medicine, for example, who focus on areas such as the cardiovascular disease and maternal health in the Black community. We also have Tuskegee University, who's renowned for its work in bioethics and public health, therefore contributing to the improved health outcomes. Obviously, we have to have more advanced community engagement. Our HBCUs are very active in our communities through health fairs, through free clinics, educational programs. We have one program here that Prairie View sponsors in cooperation and collaboration with the city of Houston called Wellness in Houston, where we offer tailored educational programs, community events, workshops, and all kinds of planning for age groups, children, all the way through seniors. And we offer these to our greater Houston community. We've had achievements such as an emphasis on the healthy eating. So constructing or restoring, revitalizing community gardens with plans to create additional gardens where there are not any right now. We have been delivering different healthy events all across Houston to over 26,000 of its residents. And we were actually administering or helping to facilitate the administration of the COVID-19 vaccinations. Additionally, HBCUs like Prairie View and Texas Southern are currently working in innovative uses of technology where we're leveraging AI to enhance research capabilities and address health disparities effectively. So we are basically taking a holistic approach by integrating research, community engagement, and innovative technologies to ensure our students are leading in healthcare fields and specifically to help address the disparities within our communities.
Very cool.
That's
Thank you so much. So Ariana, you're the case in point here in many ways of somebody who's that bridge between HBCU participation and innovation at the front lines here. How are you using that experience to bring a solution to market in a community the way you are? How are you doing that? And how do you do that in particular? I'd be curious if you could comment on how you do that without um, accidentally reinforcing some of the systemic biases or addressing some of the issues that Julia said, you know?
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think kind of more like Julius, I've worked in industry prior to starting the company. So I worked at large biotech companies. I worked at large device
Mm-hmm.
companies. So understanding what those kind of company goals are, right? Like what are our goals from from an impact standpoint? But the other side is, being a Black woman, being a mother of four, specifically with Navigate maternity, we saw there was an opportunity to do something more and better for mothers and also for Black mothers. I'd say that that's how we were able to marry the two. Really, it's from our leadership team's experience. I started the company because I was a high-risk mom during COVID. I'd had 2 prior C-sections. I wasn't being touched during my 3rd pregnancy, and that was my first kind of spark to say, wait, there's something that we could do better. Meanwhile, I'm also working in corporate spaces and working in device and seeing, okay, there's an opportunity where, just like Julius laid out perfectly, there are so many gaps with manufacturers because they do not have diverse leadership and diverse teams. And so they miss opportunities to, have our technologies impact certain patient populations. So all this really culminated with my 4th pregnancy, where I almost died due to racial bias. And it was that experience that led me to say, wait, we've got to do something now. Again, as somebody who's worked in the industry, my husband is also an orthopedic spine surgeon. So I kind of have this clinical piece within my home and saying, okay, with my expertise, with the expertise of our team, I have Dr. Harris, who is an OB-GYN. I have Thea James, who's worked in the payer side of the business for 13 years. Between the 3 of us, we can really come up with something that's going to impact moms. And so we focused on hypertension management because we understand that managing hypertension appropriately and accurately in pregnant women can lead to better outcomes. And then it was also adding in, okay, we have to have a tech piece. So it's kind of all of these things to say, we understand the problem, here are the gaps, and this is how we fill the gaps. And that will lead us to our goal, which is to improve the outcomes.
That's great. I'm glad you're okay.
Thank you.
It's incredible, how many times I've heard stories like that and how many, I think, healthcare companies are started by people who've just had a bad experience with the system. And it's funny, you don't hear about that in a lot of other industries quite the same way.
No.
I mean, nobody wakes up and says, I decided to invent a new video game because, I had a bad experience with video games.
Right.
So the importance of user-centered design, right, and specifically the application of equitable design is essential here. It sounds so. How do you bridge? I'm gonna start with you, Ariana. I'm gonna move through to the rest of you because I think this is a really important question. How do you rise above yourself, right? How do you think about patient-centered design that's not you? You're just one, right? How do you think about
Right.
that in a scalable way? How do you bring that into your business and embed it as a product, in the product across the board? So you're designing for larger populations and making something scalable.
Absolutely. So, I think first is, what is your goal, right? So I think first it's identifying who is the patient population that you're looking to serve. So once you identify who that patient population is, and most times is based on the disease state, but based on that, then you start testing. Now, granted, we have a device and tech. So for us, our device was fairly well studied, but it was for us identifying and studying our device plus our tech in the patient population that we want to serve. So just to your point, we're an N of 1, right? I'm an N of 1. I need to know in real world, how does our solution work? And so I say test and test quickly. Learn and fail fast so that you can incorporate those changes into the design. I can give probably several examples. I mean, just even simple things like, hey guys, our login needs to be a Face ID. Patients do not want to have to enter in their information, just simple things like that. But
Right.
it makes a big difference in terms of like the usability. So I really think is that you have to ask the patient population. You have to test it with that patient population. You get their feedback and then you incorporate that or into your design or into your future designs.
Mm-hmm. Julius, you know, your example was really interesting, and I think the thing that really stuck out to me was, in this case, the users, in many cases, the clinician, right? I mean, they're the ones that have to bring the patient to the party. Nobody wakes up and says, "Hey, I wonder if I have prostate cancer," you know? How do you think about it from a user-centered design when the provider is the user? You're on mute, Julius.
Hey, first of all, I want to thank Michelle for the groundbreaking work she's doing at the university she's affiliated with, and Ariana. That the story you told is just, it hurts me emotionally that you even had to deal with something like that. And your story is not a single story. A lot of Black and brown women have had to deal with the same kind of slipshod treatment from the medical community. And so, in answer to your question, Lisa, the the bottom line is a lot of these diseases are relatively treatable. Prostate cancer is a relatively treatable disease. If you screen for it early enough, if you can get to it early enough before it's metastasized, there are all sorts of ways to treat it. And when I look at the disease states that we're targeting at Beijing, whether it's breast cancer, lung cancer, colon cancer, pancreatic cancer on the solid body tumor side, or lymphocytic, chronic lymphocytic leukemia, mantle cell lymphoma, or some of the other hematologic diseases. All of these diseases, and these are tough cancers, disproportionately affect Black and brown people. And we saw this play out during the COVID pandemic when the tide washed out and all these comorbidities showed that this group of patients was having a disproportionate mortality and morbidity. So the challenge is to be sure that we are paying attention to those patients. And in fact, if you look at it from an industry perspective, they're going to be driving a disproportionate share of our revenue because they have more of the disease. And the more that we can educate, the more that we can screen, the more that we can get the word out, the better the outcomes will be for people who are being treated. The way to do that is exactly what Ariana and Michelle talked about. The organizations that they are working with, the platforms they put together, have credibility and trust in those communities. A lot of times, the big medical establishment or the big pharma establishment or whatever the insurance company is, or all of these things that are in our sort of discombobulated healthcare system, don't have trust and credibility in those at-risk communities. And so Michelle knows, or Ariana knows, there are 4 historically Black medical schools, Meharry in Nashville, Howard in Washington, D.C., and of course the Morehouse School of Medicine, which Michelle talked about in Atlanta, and then the one that's west of the Mississippi, the Charles Drew, which is out there in Los Angeles.
My
We're
good friend Deborah
developing
Proctor
relationships.
is there, yeah.
Yeah, we're trying to develop relationships, and we want to be sure that we have diversity in our clinical trial process because it's going to allow us to develop more efficacious treatment modalities.
Yeah. And then I just want to hop in here just really
Please.
quickly. I think it's really key. The other piece too, Julie, that you just hit on, we also have to engage SNMA and the NMA. I mean,
Right.
these are whenever you're thinking about providers that are taking care of these diverse patient populations, often those providers come through the student version of NMA, or they come in through or they then join the NMA. That is the country's largest group of Black medical students and Black physicians. We as companies should be engaging these groups often so that we can partner with them, so that we can bring these technologies to them. Because it is just what Julie said. Often people are not even going to where these doctors are. They're not even telling them. And that's one of the things that at Navigate, we do differently. We partner with the NMA. We partner with these groups so that Black physicians know about us because we know they're taking care of Black patients.
And again, that brings all sorts of credibility and trust because those people are where those patient populations are. There was actually, Lisa, there was actually an article a clinical study in the Journal of the American Medical Association about a year ago that said Black patients actually have better health outcomes when they're treated by Black physicians. And Ariana, I spoke at the NMA meeting in New Orleans last year.
Oh, did you?
And when I got on stage, I said I attended my first NMA meeting when I was 10 years old. I'll have to tell you why later on, but my parents were both members.
Oh, please. I'd love to hear that offline. Yes, awesome.
Michelle, can I ask you to weigh in on this topic? And I'm particularly interested in this whole idea of, you know, how you translate things from the university side to the commercial side, because my theory of life is that research is fantastic and necessary, but it's insufficient to make a difference, right? You got to get it into the commercial scaling phase. So how do you apply these principles, and how do you work with organizations, or how does the university work with innovators to get stuff out there, based on the work?
Yes, definitely. So it is critical for us to, through partnerships, gain the ability to take what we're teaching them in the classroom, what we are providing from an academic instruction point, to actually put it into practice. So things such as the HBCU, Heart of Innovation HBCU Challenge, that's an opportunity that our students will have to take what they've created and put it before an audience, and then be given a guidance through mentorship, through resources financially, through other opportunities that our school may not have, and allowing them to take it a step further. The more opportunities like that we can get, and even through the process of internships or externships, through the process of shadowing so many different ways, allowing our students to not only learn it here, but be able to see it in practice and then think about it and apply it and say, oh, okay, but I think it's missing this little piece here of people or a mode of people that they haven't thought about because it's not in that current realm. So it's really important to have the opportunities for them to actually take and put into practice what they're learning, not just once they graduate, but even during that time of being in school, so that as they're getting towards that end and also going on to the next level of education, in some instances, they've had some real world experiences. With my students, I tend to really push them, to try to do some research, to try to do some actual hands-on where they can, of course, limited in this medical kind of environment, but there are some people who will allow them to at least come in, hear the lingo, understand, see what's going on, so that as they are finishing their matriculation and going to that next level, it makes better sense. They're able to know what questions to ask, better questions to ask, to truly understand and to get them thinking and coming up with some additional innovations. We all have in our families situations that we wished we had known something, right? That had we known, we would have acted or reacted in a different manner. One of the things that I tell my children, as well as my students all the time, you don't know what you don't know. So as much as possible, putting yourself in the environments to just be exposed. So these types of this panel, having this conversation, and our students who are able to be on, hearing what we're talking about, again, letting them know they don't know what they don't know, and being able to now say, let me do further research. Let me ask some questions. Let me make some connections where I can.
So there's a question in the Q&A. Someone asked, a different Michelle asked, specifically about how can entrepreneurs connect with HBCUs to learn, to ensure they're targeting, patients correctly, product design correctly, really to learn from that wealth of knowledge. Are there paths specifically into the HBCUs, pardon me, to do that well?
Yes, definitely. So the Careers and Professional Development or Career Services Department on any campus would be a great way to come in, because we will definitely funnel you into whatever college that particular need is from. So for example, those who are interested in something with the healthcare that we're doing, we have our awesome School of Public and Allied Health that is doing some breaking work as well. So we would just funnel them there. You can also, just look up and find out who sometimes the deans are. But I think it's easier if you go through the career services type departments, because we have a invested interest Not that they don't, but they're kind of more focused on that academic part of it. We have that invested interest to make sure we're making those connections and providing those opportunities where we can, making sure we are able to publicize to the companies, hey, yeah, we've got some great students that really can bring a wealth of value to you if you take that chance on them.
Mm-hmm. That's great, actually. I didn't even know that myself. Ariana, just changing a little bit. You're Black, you're a woman. It's the double whammy as an entrepreneur. It makes it much harder to raise money, harder to be taken seriously, all of the things we all know. Um, what have you done to overcome it, or how are you trying to overcome it? What is the, I don't want to focus on the challenges themselves if they're well documented out there in the universe, but what are the solutions?
Yeah, I mean, I think the solution doesn't lie with the entrepreneur. I think it lies with VC. So to be frank,
So
navigating.
in other words, no luck
Yeah,
for you ever, huh?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I just because I think the reality of it. So for instance, Navigate is a VC backed company, which is, I mean, we're one of the few. I think the last number, it was less than 0.5% of all Black women ever raise around, and we or become VC backed, and we've raised an angel round, and now we've raised a seed. So we are unique in that way. However, I can't tell you how many no's we heard along that journey to becoming VC backed. So my frank conclusion is that it lies with the VCs and not with us. I'll never forget, I went to a really pretty prestigious CEO summit, and I ran across a founder, and he told me, he was a white male, he said, I don't focus on being profitable. I focus on raising money. And that's his secret sauce. And so that, unfortunately, is, as we all know, is not the journey of a Black woman founder. But what I would say to
Not
any
the journey of most successful companies, I'll tell you that.
exactly, right? Because who's not focusing on being profitable? Because they don't have to. But what I would say to any other Black woman founder or any other Black founder is that, don't focus on that. Don't focus on and frankly, don't focus on VC. Focus on building your business, and VC will come. That
Yeah,
is.
I think there's some truth to that, although I'll push back on you a little bit as one of those horrible VC people. I think that it is up to the entrepreneur to help draw the picture of the market opportunity and how big it is and why it's achievable to get at it. I mean, I think Julius made that case really well, and his example is, if you can show a demand curve that equals money,
But yeah, and
I think it's hard to get heard. I grant you that, but I think,
yeah. I
it's
mean,
really important the reason you probably got where you got is because you demonstrated there was demand and there was money after it.
right. And so I still say too that, considering how, and again, I'm an N of one. I mean, but I can pretty much anecdotally tell you every Black founder that I've ever worked with, who many of them are also venture back. We're a small group. They can also tell you we can paint the picture, we can paint a Picasso. And at the end of the day, we often will still hear no. And so I think the reality of it is that for Black founders, instead of, considering that 99.5% of that funding doesn't go to us, we need to think of other mechanisms to gain the capital necessary to become profitable. And then
I
we
think that's
think of a
very true.
business model.
That's very true.
Yeah. So in terms of like really being successful. Now, you can spin your wheels with VC trying to get them to do something that 99% of the time they're not going to do, right? You can't. But I'll be frank, once we stopped focusing on VC and we started focusing on our business and how to be profitable and to hit milestones, that's when VC found us. And it's also too, it's not just about getting funding, it's about finding the right investors to invest in the business. So you want people who believe in the vision, who believe in the team, who are going to support you. I think there's a lot of things when thinking about funding, but in terms of, back to your question about, as a Black woman, kind of that double whammy, that is my advice to any other Black woman founder. Don't focus on venture capital, focus on building your business. And then venture capital, hopefully, even if they never do, hopefully they they come and you can have the funding necessary. But if they never come, focus on being profitable.
No, I think that's right. And I think, slow and steady wins the race in a lot of the cases here. And
Yeah.
and I think there's a lot of people that took a lot of venture capital that really wish they didn't. And I don't blame them, because it doesn't always make the business.
Yeah, it just right. And so I think that's where you have to identify what business you are in and what your model is. And to your point, every company is not a VC backable company, right? It's just not, as you know.
Right.
But it's, but I think VC has work when it comes to diversity.
So I'm curious from any of you, what strategies are you seeing out there to bring resources to fill that gap that Ariana so artfully described? So what are the alternatives? What are the solutions and resources out there for coaching, for professional development, for alternative sources of capital, for interesting ways to grow the businesses that are created, whether they're from HBCUs or relevant to them, that you've seen work?
Well, I'll go ahead, Ariana.
Go ahead, Julie.
I was just going to say, just briefly, I think that, there are funding, whether you're doing SBIR. I think some of especially if you're in healthcare, just because healthcare, depending on where you are, everything is not a digital health product, and you may need to do some research that requires X amount of funding. So I would say that as a vehicle. I also would say too, I think angels are a great vehicle too, right? Where you don't have to do a price round, you could do safes, and you can raise money, depending on like the network. Eiffel is one of those groups. There's also Pipeline Angels. These aren't venture firms, but they're angel groups. And I feel like when you have an opportunity to speak with angels who are all accredited investors, you have the opportunity to kind of sell your story, and you may get better buy-in quicker. So those are some of the ways. And then some of these other accelerators, just like, us talking about one that we're doing now. Those non-dilutive forms of capital definitely helped. We raised about $220,000 in some of the non-dilutive funding between some of the pitch competitions and accelerators. And, it's not, in the scheme of things, it's not a huge amount of capital, but it does help. And then lastly, physicians. Physician angels were some of our biggest backers. Black OBs invested in us first. They cut the first checks. So, that's another opportunity. Depending on your disease state, you may want to go to the Black physicians within that discipline.
Other thoughts, Julius? Or
I just wanted to add that on what Ariana was saying, is that the VC world is basically, I won't call them despicable. I'll just say that they haven't met the bar when it comes to investing in a lot of companies owned by women or women of color, depending on the intersectionality. So whether it's VC, PE, hedge fund, whoever it is that you're trying to pitch to, oftentimes women or Black and brown companies have to go to relatives or go into credit card debt or whatever it is to raise the initial funding to get their enterprises off the ground. The other thing that's critically important is being able to develop relationships with just an individual is all it takes. At some point, Ariana was talking about OBGYNs, but the other people who seem to have a lot of money are dentists. I don't know why, but they've backed a lot of these things. So again, if you can go to a professional, it doesn't necessarily have to, well, in your case, Ariana, it made sense to go to the OB-GYN community, but oftentimes it can be a professional, somebody else who owns a business or somebody else who's started something up that happens to be a person of color or has relationships within those communities. And then there are VCs that actually have as their mission to support underrepresented minority and female and the like types of startups. I know Mitch and Frida Kapor, who are out of Oakland and have the Kapor Institute. I don't know if you've heard of them. Look them up if you haven't. Mitch Kapor is a Silicon Valley legend. He invented Lotus Notes, Lotus 123, and he and his spouse Frida Kapor Klein have been adamant about being sure that they're investing in women and underrepresented demographic companies. So they've done a lot in that space, not only as angels, but also as straight out investors. And their VC, which is again based in Oakland, has done a lot of that work. So there are specific organizations to focus on this. But as far as the VC world goes, I pretty much agree with Ariana. They've just undershot the mark spectacularly. So oftentimes people who are trying to do the work that Ariana has done have had to just grit it out and start up what they could and then connect with individuals who can help support them. Oftentimes I'll ask people, I say, hey, I'm leading diversity and global health equity at Beijing. What do you think my job is? And they'll talk about, well, yeah, I'm sure that you're doing stuff in unconscious bias and forming affinity groups and doing a lot of work around recruiting minorities, and say, no, my all of that's tactical actions. Yeah, those things are pretty straightforward. But I said my most important job is to be developing relationships of trust with the CEO and the most senior people in our organization and members of the board so that I can lead them in the right direction and they understand what needs to be done next. The example I gave you around prostate cancer was obvious to me, and yet nobody else saw it. And I had to still go out of my way to prove it and to come up with empirical evidence to show this is actually going to drive a lot of revenue and top line growth for us. So you're basically fighting a fight every time you try to go out and say, this is something that's going to be good for us.
So, are there examples, Michelle, and that you could give of companies that have successfully made this transition out of, say, Prairie View, or others that that, and sort of what was the trick? What created, escape velocity for them?
I would say it's like what Julius and Aryan have said. Showing the need, right? Making sure they understand the need, showing that you have available solutions. We tend to look at marketing our students or developing our students so that they're able to speak that language that they need to speak when they go before these companies. We as the career and professional development team look at trying to ensure the relationships are established. And then once the relationship is established, showing, okay, yes, if you invest in us, if you provide us with these resources, these are the types of students that we're preparing for you. So we will take our students to represent us. We have a team of career ambassadors that are able to look the part and speak the part of what is needed in their environment, in that company. One of the other things we do is we ask for a partnership, right? So they get to come on campus, they get to do some things in our classrooms, they get to develop some programs and processes and put some things in place on our campus, which, I know we're kind of sort of not in this world of DEI, but it still looks good for them to be involved in those environments. And so that's one of the biggest things that we've done, and just showing the capability of our students. I think more and more and more HBCU students have gained the attention of the United States and the corporate world in some of the things that they've done.
Yeah.
And so we also leverage our alumni, right? We leverage our alumni. We have strong alumni groups in most of the Fortune 500 companies that have proven their abilities. So it's not as hard now for them to come into Prairie View. Some of the other smaller HBCUs are still trying to get that footing. But for us, we're just always making sure we put our students in the best position for success, and putting them first, having that empathy and compassion to make sure they're prepared and ready is just a win-win for us. Because now when they're out there, they're able to speak to what Prairie View did for them, how Prairie View prepared them, and show that example and model that professionalism and that expected ability.
I don't know if people in the audience have questions. If you do, this would be a great time to stick them in the Q&A at the bottom of the screen. But I guess if you could, I'm going to go around the horn here, each person. We've covered some of this, but if you reflect on sort of the most useful things that you've learned, and maybe you could give one useful tip to those paying attention on the healthcare innovator front. One thing to not do not do this. And one thing to do. What is the thing you must do? And if it's something you can, think of that you haven't already said, that's even better. I know you've said some stuff that's pretty core and important already. And or else, and then beyond those two things, the one thing not to do, the one thing to do, what else is top of mind for you? What do you hope to see come out of the world of innovation in this realm that you haven't yet seen? So those are my three final questions for you all. Ariana, why don't we start with you?
Okay, so the one thing to do is to keep going. Keep going. Don't stop. So that is my thing to not do. Keep going and do not stop. You will hear no so often, and you have to accept that as a part of your journey. The more no's that you get, the closer you are to your yes. So that is my advice for all of the innovators. The thing that I haven't seen that I'd like to see, that's a hard one. I think the thing that I would like to see from innovators, especially around, women's health is, really, I'd like to see more women of color at the forefront in women's health, and not just from a domestic standpoint, but from a global standpoint. I think recently there was an article that came out around Flow, because Flow is like one of the, has one of the highest valuations, but it's an app that was created by men for women. And so when we think about women's health, often the people that have created these innovations don't look like us. They aren't women. And so I'd like to see more women at the forefront of our own solutions.
All right, Julius?
Hey, I
Not
was
to do, one to do, and what do you hope to see they haven't seen yet?
I'll combine all of these into one quick story. Oftentimes when I've explained to people that if you're in the biotech space, a lot of the work you're going to be doing is actually going to be about driving revenue for the organization, but at the same time, you can do a lot of very good work in the communities that are going to be benefiting from and affected by the diseases and the therapeutic areas of focus that you're trying to address. One person told me that this is about a year ago. He said, this is like trying to turn a battleship around. You can't do this. And I said, guess what? I've actually turned a battleship around more than once. And so I said, when I was in the Navy, I was in the recommissioning crew for the USS Missouri, one of the most famous ships in nautical history. You'll have to look it up to see why it's famous. And I said, you can turn a battleship around. You just have to think about your turn about 15 nautical miles before you get there. And you got to be sure that everybody's well trained and that the engineering department's ready to answer all bells, and you've got deep water under the keel and all the other things that you have to do to be sure you aren't about to hit anybody else. So it has to do with foresight. The other thing to be very clear about is the mission clarity above and beyond everything else. What are you trying to do here? Why are we trying to do it? That's the conceptual clarity. And finally, the Navy, as you can see, was a very formative time for me. The other important thing is you can delegate authority, but not responsibility. So you're going to fail a lot. I bumped into a lot of walls. I failed quite a bit. I learned a lot from the failures. The challenge is, as a person of color, I don't get as many chances to fail as some other people do. But you have to learn from those and keep, as Ariana said, keep going, keep pushing forward. Finally, it's the alignment and the relationship building. Be sure that you're always, every time you attend something, every time you're in an interaction with a group, you don't have to target everybody, but try to develop a relationship with at least one person in the organization that can be of benefit to you and that you can benefit. So I remember when I was at J&J, and there was a meeting that the CEO spoke to everybody at, and I said, I'm going to go and ask him to be my mentor. And I went up and talked to Bill Weldon, who was the CEO of this. I said, hey, I'd love if you were my mentor. And I was already expecting him to say, well, I'm really busy. I don't have time. And my next question was going to be, well, how about somebody you can recommend who may be reporting to you? And before I could even ask, he said, I'm busy, but I'm going to connect you with our vice chair. I want you to meet him. And we ended up developing a great relationship. So you got to be bold enough to ask the question, because if you don't ask it, you're never going to get an answer.
That's so true. I actually have a sign on my refrigerator that my daughter framed for me because I said it so often. She said, you need it on a frame so you don't have to say it anymore, which is if you don't ask, you don't get. And I was like, that is so true.
So you can't turn a battleship around.
You can turn a battleship around. Michelle.
Yes. So, let's see what I would say not to do. I would say don't be closed off, closed-minded, right? Because you think that you know it all, or you've already achieved, or you've already, set a precedent. Don't be closed-minded. The second thing I would say, do be a lifelong learner.
Mm,
Open to always seeing what can I learn from this environment, from this situation, from this decision, from this no, because we are going to get a lot of no. So what do I learn from this no? Let's think about it. How do I continue to move forward? And that's my advice. Keep going, keep moving. Don't be limited by what someone else says, because know your why. Your why be the driving factor why you keep going. And understanding no's will eventually turn into a yes. Don't count how many. I think Steve Harvey and some other people have talked about the hundreds and thousands in some cases of no's that they got.
yeah.
And so, a no really just is, you don't know enough about it to say yes to me, yes. So let me go back, think about what I've said, think about what I've done, think about what I've prepared, and then bring it again. Let's see what the next one comes with.
Yeah, that's great. So let me give you, I guess I'm gonna add mine actually. Don't assume all people are biased against you. They just made me kind of ignorant. Um,
Kind of.
I think, and and oftentimes as an investor, I get people that don't talk to me in my language, which is not about race, it's about money, or it's about mission, or it's about, whatever the charter of that fund is. And they don't understand my business. They may understand their business, but they don't understand my business. And when you talk to me, but try to sell me, you got to understand my business, just like you do when you sell to a customer. And so I think being really good at and diligent about understanding the business that you're, of the person you're speaking to and what motivates them and how they're rewarded and how their successes are measured is really, really important. And that applies to whomever you're speaking to, not just to your customers that you sell to. So really and the second thing I'd say is like, get your storytelling right. Storytelling is everything. Um, I see it in customer pitches, I see it in VC pitches, I see it everywhere. You spend too much time focusing on the technology and how something works and not why somebody should care. Tell the story. And it's what grabs people and brings their emotions to the table. And that's what makes them want to pay attention further. And then hit them with why the financial, implications are good or whatever it may be. But you got to really tell a good story. And like you're a celebrity, acting in a play, not like you're a technologist or an engineer or a healthcare person, but like you're a storyteller. So that's mine. A couple questions from the audience. Any recommendations on avoiding duplication in service areas and linking groups through partnerships? So I think really finding groups, or are there specific groups you guys know of that, besides the HBCUs, that have paths to funding for entrepreneurs of color or other folks who might help young companies and entrepreneurs be successful? Anybody in particular you've run across, Ariana, that's been particularly good at this? Or
I'd say I think the biggest thing are some of the accelerators. It really just depends on where, like what space you're sitting in within healthcare. So like, for instance, Verizon was a really good partner, but they, I think, are more helpful when you have a digital tech
Mhm.
product. In addition, we have tech and hardware, but they're very helpful on the health tech side of things. You know, I'd say those are probably the best. I'm reading the question too. I think the other piece are as association. So I think AvdaMed is probably one of the best. That is the Medical Technology Association, and I would say if you're not part of it, then there's a gap. I mean, that is where you have your J&J, Hologic, your larger companies. In addition to, then you have Excel companies. So all of us that are generating under 100 million in revenue, but the connections are amazing. So I would also suggest any medical tech company to join that.
You have a quick one, Julius? Go for it.
Yeah, Dr. Chad Womack, PhD biochem, who runs STEM programs at the UNCF, United Negro College Fund, extremely well networked. And also check out the website for the organization. I'm chair of the board of Center for Healthcare Innovation, www.chisite.org.
Awesome. Thank you
Again,
so
just an
much.
unbelievable network.
Fantastic. That's great. All right, we are at the end. I'm sorry we didn't get to all the questions. I'll just, in closing, thank you so much, all of you, for your comments and being here today. I really appreciate you as panelists and as contributors to our healthcare system, which needs all the help it can get. For those of you who are interested in the Heart of Innovation HBCU Challenge, we have a programs ongoing. We're very interested in having more people around it. It's a great opportunity to showcase innovative solutions that address critical areas of health. The challenge is seeking solutions for undergraduate students, graduate students, or alumni from HBCUs who are focused on addressing social drivers of health, cardiovascular health, or environmental health. And the applications are open through January 6th. We'll be picking 10 companies, which is always hard to do because there's always way more good ones, but you can only pick 10. So sorry if we're one of your no's. Someday you'll get to that yes, I promise. We offer a non-dilutive $10,000 grant, mentorship, and Matter membership to those who get to participate. Matter is a wonderful organization. It's been around a long time and does great work. So those who are interested in applying, please do. You can find it on our website. I think there's a link somewhere that's been dropped in here. And we look forward to staying in touch. Good luck.